You're moving through a passage 12 centimeters wide. Not metaphorically, 12 centimeters, the width of your hand. You have to exhale completely to fit your rib cage through, then pull yourself forward with your fingertips on wet rock. The passage drops 17 meters at one point. You're carrying something heavy, something that doesn't help you navigate, something you could leave behind and nobody would stop you. You don't leave it, you keep going. What happened in the Rising Star Cave system in South Africa 236,000 years ago, or possibly earlier, is one of the most contested and unsettling discoveries in the history of human origins. Not because it's gruesome, because it's inexplicable. The creature that did this had a brain roughly the size of your fist. When scientists talk about what separates humans from other animals, brain size comes up early. The capacity for abstract thought, for symbol, for ritual, for belief. These are associated in almost every model with a brain large enough to generate them. We've built an entire framework around this idea. Bigger brain, more complexity. More complexity, more meaning-making. More meaning-making, possibly, more belief. It's a clean story. It's been the dominant story in paleoanthropology for over a century. The Homo naledi discovery didn't just challenge this framework. It asked whether the framework was ever right. Because here is the thing the discovery forces you to confront. If a creature with a brain that small was deliberately burying its dead, then either burial behavior doesn't require the cognitive complexity we assumed, or we've been wrong about what cognitive complexity looks like when we can't observe it directly. And both of those conclusions have enormous consequences for how we think about human uniqueness, about what belief requires, about when, in the history of life on Earth, the line between animal dying and someone dying first appeared. Homo naledi was announced to the world in 2015 after an excavation led by paleoanthropologist Lee Berger in the Rising Star Cave system near Johannesburg, South Africa. The fossils represented at least 15 to 20 individuals of various ages, found deep inside the cave in a chamber called the Dinaledi Chamber, a space accessible only through a vertical drop and a passage so narrow that the researchers who retrieved the fossils had to be specifically selected for small body size. Homo naledi was small, adult height around 1.5 meters, a body that mixed ancient and modern features, hands that could grip tools, feet built for upright walking, but a skull that held a brain we would have previously dismissed as incapable of the behavior we're about to describe. The fossils were not the remains of animals dragged there by predators. The skeletal elements were too complete, too carefully arranged, and too concentrated in a specific area of the chamber. The evidence showed deliberate, repeated placement of bodies in that chamber, over time, by members of the same species. Now here's what makes this genuinely hard to process. You're moving through that passage right now, not the 12-centimeter section, the approach. You've already been crawling for 20 minutes, your torch throwing 3 feet of orange light against walls that press close on both sides. The person behind you is breathing loud enough that you can hear it over the sound of your own movement. Ahead of you, the passage narrows further. You know what you're carrying. You know where you're going. And here's what you don't have. You don't have a brain large enough, by every measurement we've previously used, to understand what death means in the way we understand it. You don't have the neural architecture we've associated with symbolic thought. You're Homo naledi. Your brain is 450 to 600 cubic centimeters. A chimpanzee's is 350 to 400. You are, technically, closer to a chimpanzee in brain volume than to the early Homo sapiens who were alive at the same time as you. And yet you're in this cave. The Dinaledi Chamber sits approximately 100 meters from the cave entrance, through a route that requires navigating 17-meter vertical drops and the 12-centimeter slot passage. This is not where things end up by accident. Animals don't drag prey this far into a cave for no reason. Predators don't accumulate bones of a single species over an extended period in a chamber this inaccessible. The 2023 analysis by Lee Berger and a large international team went further. Evidence suggested that Homo naledi may have used fire to navigate the cave, charred bone and ash deposits consistent with torch use. There are possible engraved marks on cave walls in the Dinaledi Chamber, geometric lines that don't appear to be accidental. Something was happening in that cave. something with a purpose. Here's where the science becomes genuinely uncomfortable, and not just for religious reasons. The association between burial behavior and belief has always been assumed to require a certain level of cognitive complexity. The thinking goes, to bury your dead, you have to understand that death is permanent. To understand that, you need a concept of self that persists beyond the immediate moment. To have a concept of self, you need a certain kind of brain. Homo naledi breaks this chain. If they were deliberately placing their dead in a cave, using fire to navigate, possibly marking walls, then either those behaviors don't require the brain complexity we thought they did, or brain complexity is not what we thought it was. Neither option is small. Researcher Agustin Fuentes, who co-authored the 2023 paper, described the discovery as evidence that meaning-making may be more ancient and more widespread than our models allow. That the capacity to treat a dead body as something other than biological waste, to carry it somewhere difficult, to place it with care, might not require what we assumed it required. I want you to think about the first time. Not the 10th time someone was carried into that cave. The first. Before it was a practice, before it was a tradition, before anyone could have known that others would do the same thing years later. One individual or a small group made a decision. The body was heavy. The passage was narrow. You've been through it. You know exactly how narrow. There was no survival benefit to this. No food, no protection, no territory gained. Just a dead member of their group, and a decision by a creature with a brain the size of a fist to go to extraordinary effort to put that body somewhere specific. That's the moment that the fossil record can't give us directly. We have the result. We have the bones in the chamber, the ash from the torches, the possible engravings on the walls. We don't have the internal state of the being who first decided this was necessary. What did they feel? Did they feel anything we'd recognize? Did it matter to them the way it would matter to you? We don't have access to that. We'll never have access to that. But they went into the dark, with the weight of someone who was no longer there. And something about that, the effort of it, the difficulty of it, the fact that they kept doing it across multiple generations, suggests it mattered to them in a way that had no practical explanation. Belief, in its oldest and simplest form, might not require theology. It might not require language or complex social structure or the specific brain architecture we've mapped onto it. It might only require the decision that a dead body is not just a dead body. That somewhere, for reasons that can't be explained by survival alone, it matters where a person ends up. Homo naledi made that decision 236,000 years ago, with a brain smaller than we thought capable of making it. What that tells us about what belief actually is, we're still trying to figure out.